Goodwill thrift shop workers, what are some of the strangest things you've found in the donations? I was a receiving and loading lead at a thrift store for a few years. We had this guy that cleaned out storage units for a living, and then he'd dump whatever he couldn't flip with us for a tax slip. He pulls up and we're going through it all. Pretty nice stuff. Looked like it was an estate sale. We get it all unloaded and then we start snooping through to see what needs to get brought to where, and we find this green glass vase filled with sand. I started pouring the sand out into the trash so we could figure if the vase was worth using. That's not sand. Somehow we ended up with an unmarked, full urn. A grinder with smoke still in it, and somehow a suitcase full of wood made it onto the floor and was brought to our attention by an elderly lady who was wanting to purchase the suitcase but didn't want the extra stuff inside. I still think a customer had to have somehow snuck a bag of wood and dumped them there, since anything going to the floor is opened and sprayed with disinfectant. Plus it was heavy, so it definitely would have been opened if it arrived that way. Either way, it made for an interesting day at work. Edit. I forgot to add money. We were allowed to keep any money we found. Usually it was the occasional few bucks in a purse someone forgot. Other times it could be big bills, or one lady locked out and found a stash of around $2,000 in $2 bills in a trinket box. When I was about 16, I worked at Goodwill for about 6 months. There was this old homeless man who used to try and sneak inside to sleep and stuff like that. Every day he'd get kicked out pretty quick by one of my female co-workers. After about a month of working there with her, the homeless man came up to the counter she was working at, gave her a Target bag filled with rocks, and left. We opened the bag and find a doll underneath about a layer of rocks. It was so friggin' creepy. The doll looked exactly like her. We flipped it over and the back had her full name sewn into it. She quit about a couple days later because she was worried about that homeless man coming back to the store. Someone donated an entire trash bag full of dirty diapers, play toys, lots of play toys. Some older and more naive workers actually priced them and put them in the sales floor. An old electronic chessboard that was somehow worth $2,000 plus. Some rich old lady came in and donated a Ziploc bag full of gold and platinum jewelry. It was real. Huge Beanie Baby collections. Guess someone finally figured out after 20 years that they weren't a solid investment. It's something you hear about but I never really saw before. Maybe not the strangest, but you actually do find some cool old shit people think is worthless. Cool job for a while. Edit. Drinking some beers now. Ask a former Goodwill employee anything. I used to sell vintage clothing wholesale. No joke, it's ultra high demand in Africa. Give me a bale of used underwear, socks, and bras and you got $500 coming your way. Edit 2. Picture of bales of clothing. Edit. Since this comment is blowing up, I used to work over in Asia as an import-exporter. Other strange random knowledge. Vintage Letterman high school jackets were huge demands. If you could fill a 20-foot container, there is $20.50 each. Most people keep them when donating. Pretty much everything you can think of used has a market. Myanmar Burma NSE Asia is probably the most insane time warp in terms of vintage stuff and daily use. Vintage 1950 to 1970 S-Class Bus is still on the road everywhere. For example, Asian and German cars. Vintage imported clothing are sometimes illegal due to killing the local markets for clothes. I've had containers seized, actually found and had interested North Korean buyers in vintage American clothes. Levi's are big there. Vintage American clothing is serious business in some poor countries. Middle East must get colder than I thought. Was always a seasonal request. Spike in used blankets in massive quantities. Need a friend who will chat you up at crazy night hours? Join Alibaba.com public chat. They're all salespeople but usually men who will bug you to be friends or practice English. Decluttering. I threw a journal from my adolescence in the bin. The journal that graphically described my first period at age 11. 14 crushes ranked in order of kissability. Mortifying youth group tales. Detailed sketches of my fantasy elf wardrobe. Dark times I'd rather not remember. Well, my packrat dad couldn't stand to see a half-full journal on the curb, so he donated it to a thrift store. Apparently, because later, someone contacted him by mail to return it. Thanks dad. Thanks stranger. So glad to have that back. Edit. My first Reddit silver, totally writing this in my journal ! 1 Thanks stranger. My dad opened a locked journal for me. Apparently, he found a note of me talking about how I was confused over my girly bits tingling sometimes. He came in from the garage and embarrassingly handed it to me. I will never forget the chill of horror that filled me when I figured out that he had read it. Edit. My dad didn't mean any harm. He gave me my privacy when I was a teenager. He opened the journal when I was in my early 20s. He is the greatest man I've ever known. Edit 2. My albino area has nothing to do with it, lol. I have vitiligo, and it happened to travel to my region. But that was in my 20s. Read up on vitiligo here. I manage a thrift store in NorCal that supports a cat rescue organization. We get strange donations all the time, such as toys, from whips to ball gags and more than a couple times a week. Ashes. I've got a bag here in my office that has some guy from Florida in it. I keep him around. He wards off ghosts and angry customers. Printed money. One time someone dropped off a backpack full of obviously copied money on big sheets of paper. Secret Service came out and got it and everything. We get disgusting stuff too. Here is a good one. Some middle-aged lady donated a bag of clothes from her son's room. This shirt was on top. It stank so bad I still dry heave thinking about it. It's hard to see on the picture, but those are yellow stains all over the shirt. We get lots of interesting old stuff. Victorian cat collar, a 1800s French tapestry, old Sears magazines, vintage records, 8 tracks etc. We recently got a set of dishes that commemorated a state university. Someone bought them for $900. Didn't even know such a thing existed before we got them. Someone donated an old Mac from the mid-90s that still worked. We fired it up and it had all sorts of personal stuff on it. We wiped it and sold it. Remember to wipe your drives, people. A few weeks ago we got a reproduction Hadafling Lord of the Ring swords. Pretty cool. I love working here. It's always something new and interesting. TLDR. Toys. Disgusting stuff. Old stuff. Human remains. May still be there, but Minneapolis had diggers, which got big palletized boxes. Heavy duty open top boxes that take up a whole pallet. Sitting on a pallet. Full of Rondo stuff that Goodwill couldn't sell. Loved that place. Edit. I did not expect to have a pile of Gaylord comments in my inbox, but I do, so thank you everyone who shared the name of those big boxes with me. Also, I believe this was the place, but again, been a while, and it's closed. But this might be similar, if you're in Minneapolis. And from other people's replies, Goodwill outlets are all over the country, often with endearing names to spruce up the image of dirty underwear and needles. This to all the current thrift shop workers in the Chicago area. A friend of mine recently died, and a few months before, she mentioned she had written a letter to me, but she never got around to sending it. She also mentioned some presents, but I have no idea what they were, but it's the letter I'd love to track down. Her family donated her possessions to charity, and well, if by chance someone comes across a letter, maybe stashed inside a book or a DVD addressed to Jade and being from Jen or Jennifer, then please hold on to it and contact me. She last lived in Arlington Heights. I don't know what was in the letter, but it was supposed to explain a lot. The last time I saw her, we spent a weekend in Fort Worth, Texas. I gave her a ring and told her I was all in. At the time I lived in New Zealand and she was going to move out to be with me. Obviously that didn't happen, and now she's dead at just 42. I'm in Australia and only heard of her passing a few weeks after her funeral, so no goodbyes or last words. Grief makes you do funny things, like trying to hold on to every last memory. I've emailed the thrift shops around Arlington Heights, just in case, but I guess I'm just seeking closure. I've created an online memorial which gives more info on our story. If anyone happens to be around the thrift shops of Arlington Heights or Wheaton and comes across it, please let me know. In the past, Jen has sent me books about writing, shucks, travel and Chicago if that's something to go on. But we also had inside jokes about clouds. We met in Japan. We traveled to New York and San Fran. Thanks, Jade Jackson. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm only 16, so I hope you didn't cringe from the editing. I hope we can get to 50,000 subscribers because I wouldn't be here without all of you. So thank you so much for your time and energy, and please subscribe.